You know, people who are self-aware, they're more likely to be promoted at work. You know, they're more likely to have healthy marriages. They're more likely to have adult kids who actually like them. You know, we like to be around people who are not defensive, but are self-aware. So we need to grow to be those kinds of people as well. And that's why we're doing this series. But here's the thing, growing spiritually, growing relationally requires self-awareness, but self-awareness requires feedback, requires mirrors. But that's not always easy. Sometimes it gets us triggered. We defend, we attack. Why is that? Well, Sheila Heen and Doug Stone, two Harvard law professors, wrote a book called Thanks for the Feedback. Great book, by the way, I'd recommend it. And they point this out. Research on happiness identifies ongoing learning and growth as a core ingredient of satisfaction in life. We may be wired to learn, they say, but it turns out learning about ourselves is a whole different ballgame. Learning about ourselves can be painful, sometimes brutally so. And the feedback can feel less like a gift of learning and more like a colonoscopy. And so we avoid feedback like we avoid colonoscopies, right? Now, here's the thing. We all know people who are painfully unaware of the way they affect us or others, right? Everybody else knows it, but they're just blind to it. They have a blind spot. They're spiritually blind to it. We know people who just can't receive feedback. They get angry or defensive or self-righteous or even hostile. But here's the thing. We also have to consider that maybe that happens to us as well. You know, Jesus called it out in the religious leaders of his day. It says in Matthew 15, Jesus says, they're blind guides leading the blind. If one blind person guides another, they're both going to fall into a ditch. And so Jesus warns us not to be spiritually blind. In other words, when we think we know ourselves well, but we're getting feedback that contradicts our view of ourselves, are we willing to listen and go to God with it so he can help us grow? Or do we reject it? Do we resist it? And Jesus warns us about that with a metaphor. He says in Matthew 6:23, but when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be filled with darkness. Then the metaphor, if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness. Now listen carefully what Jesus is saying. He's saying if I think, I see myself accurately, but I won't consider feedback to the contrary and take it to God to say, God, what do you want to show me? Then I'm in the dark. I'm spiritually in the dark. And he says, and that's a deep, deep darkness. Why does he say that? Well, because if you are unwilling to receive feedback, if you're just going to defend and be angry and all that, then you can't grow. And God works with our willingness. So not even God can force us or will force us.